1, 2, is this on?
Over the years, we've seen plenty of unique firings and departures in wrestling.
David Taylor once spoke up in a meeting about the travel, and he disappeared or was released from the company shortly after. That's just how it was. It was their way, and if you tried to stand up for yourself or for your peers, you would suffer the consequences.
Many are tied to controversy, others make sense, but came about in interesting ways.
Basically, they asked him to go into alcohol rehab, and he said no.
Meanwhile, some are just completely unfair.
And we're in the parking lot, and Rob Van Dam, Booker T, Batista, Randy Orton, we're all passing it around. Drop my bags and start getting a phone call. John Laurinaitis, he goes, but Vince wants me to make an example of somebody.
From substance use to refusals to complaints to bad performance.
I asked him what he wants, and I'll never forget. He just, I'll get 4 vodkas. And he threw it at about 98 miles per hour, and I just walked away.
We'll have examples of all this and more today, as we list 10 wrestlers who departed WWE under crazy circumstances.
And then they canceled the match right there, and then I just felt everything drained, and it was at that moment I realized, okay, I'm going to Japan.
The details and true extent of R-Truth's contract expiring in 2025 was revealed on WWE Unreal. With negotiations at a stalemate, it was agreed in principle that Truth was not going to be re-signed. Then once he announced this on social media, the outpouring was huge, both from his peers and fans who were upset at the decision.
I got the call, I was released, and I put a tweet out.
It was just like a wave of sadness kind of took over everyone here in the WWE.
The WWE Universe said no. That's not acceptable.
When Truth returned to TV a week following the news, Triple H claimed it was all part of the show, something Truth denied.
R-Truth, was he actually released or leaving the company? And if so, how much did fans play a role in it? Or was there something else that made you guys decide, like, you know what, we want this guy still here?
I love the question. You enjoying the show? Whole part of the show, man.
On WWE Unreal, Hunter explained that Truth was always under contract, stating it was a breakdown in communication, which led to the situation blowing up like it did.
When you are dealing with contracts and money and you're very far apart in the numbers and communication breaks down, it's very easy for both sides to read into the communications differently. Okay, well, if you're not going to come to us, then Truth, we're going to let your contract lapse. Knowing that hopefully maybe this will force his hand to say, well, hold on a second, can we talk? He immediately went out on social and said he was fired, which he was never fired. Contrary to prior belief, he was never not under contract with us. No one ever really wanted him to leave. All we wanted to do was get to an amicable place.
I took it as I was released. I was hurt.
Each party had a different side of the story, though most fans sided with Truth all the way through.
Hope you know none of that shit was meant in any way other than just where we were, right? And it's just a fucking business thing, but man, I'm so fucking happy you're still here and all that.
Thank you, man. Yeah.
Unreal also highlighted Naomi and Sasha Banks' departure in 2022. They walked out as tag team champions, citing creative differences. The company even responded on screen and with a statement.
Sasha Banks and Naomi summarily and unprofessionally left the arena before this match could take place.
On the night they went home, Naomi and Sasha had reservations about being pitted against each other in a multi-person match. This ultimately led to them quitting WWE.
Different time, different head of creative, different head of talent relations.
She and Sasha Banks had just had enough, and they left.
That's just the wrong thing to do. You work the show, and you work the show not because you don't want to then. It's for down the line when things cool off and you go, glad I really didn't burn that bridge.
I needed to stand up for myself.
After originally being fired in 2001 for possessing substances going through an airport, Grandmaster SEXAY had a blink and you miss it WWE return in 2004. It quickly became clear the company had no plans for him outside of being an enhancement talent. However, even at that, you would have expected his comeback to last longer than one match. In his 4th book, No is a 4-letter word, Chris Jericho spoke about Grandmaster's brief run in 2004. Here, Y2J revealed the reason why SEXAY's return was so brief. Jericho doesn't mention SEXAY by name, but he's the only wrestler that returned that year who fits the criteria Chris described.
One night in Pittsburgh in 2004, I was in Vince's office going over a promo for Raw when the dark matches started. A certain performer who had had a decent run in the company a few years prior, I'll call him Bobby Baby to protect his ego, had just been rehired after some sort of hiatus and was having a few non-televised matches to try out a new character. Unfortunately, it wasn't working, and when Vince, who was already in a surly mood, saw him struggling through a dismal match, he flipped his toupee. Why the hell is this guy in my ring? Who hired him? Look at this. He's the shits and I don't want to see him ever again. Needless to say, we never saw poor Bobby Baby in a WWE ring ever again, and I'll bet nobody even told him why he was being let go.
Over the next decade, Grandmaster came back a few more times as one-offs, but never got re-signed. Writer positions in WWE typically had a very quick turnover. They would often hire people with little to no product knowledge, preferring TV people compared to those who were wrestling focused. A writer who'd just been hired named Kenise Mobley went on the Asian Not Asian podcast. Here she admitted not knowing anything about wrestling, including the name of then WWE champion Bobby Lashley.
Also a surprise for me. They did not require me to know anything about wrestling, but I do have a background in film production and comedy writing, and they're like, perfect, come on in. But we come up with catchphrases, hand signals, or whatever. I really don't.
Oh, God.
I don't know enough
so
about
problematic.
it. I truly have not started yet, so I don't know enough about it. And if they hear this, I'm really hoping they don't, like, revoke my offer. But the people I know that are on it are Bobby... I mean, his name is either Bobby Ashley or Bobby Lashley, and I really should know that.
This interview made the rounds online, and because of this, she was promptly fired before ever officially starting. The writer probably wasn't aware her comments would cause such a stir, because she'd never seen wrestling, but it says more about the company that they'd actively hire people who knew nothing about the show they were writing for. Historically, WWE's brutal schedule saw wrestlers doing shows all over the world. Sometimes the talent wasn't best looked after on these trips, particularly when business was down in the mid-2000s. In his book, ring announcer Justin Roberts outlines some of these difficult travel conditions. Roberts mentioned a scheduled tour where the crew had no opportunity to get any sleep for an entire weekend of shows.
I looked around on a plane from San Francisco to Washington, D.C. to see everybody from this tour next to me, in front of me, and behind me, and coach. There were some huge guys who destroyed their bodies for this company. The company makes all this money off the guys busting their butts, and they fly around the world and coach. When I first started, everyone was flown in business. When the guys are huge and their bodies are sore from nightly matches, it's simply cruel to do that to them. The international flights were rarely direct as well, even if we were flying from a hub, as it was cheaper to connect.
When Justin raised concern about this to the office, he was reminded of a wrestler who got fired for doing a similar thing in the past, that being former WCW talent Dave Taylor, who spent 2 years with WWE from 06 to 08.
I was called into John Laurinaitis' office. He mentioned he heard that I said the upcoming tour was dangerous. He explained in a non-threatening way that if I didn't feel safe, there was someone else who could take my spot. I stood up for us as a group, which was frowned upon, and that's how it was dealt with, so I told him I understood and worked the tour. David Taylor once spoke up in a meeting about the travel, and he disappeared or was released from the company shortly after. That's just how it was. It was their way, and if you tried to stand up for yourself or for your peers, you would suffer the consequences.
Taylor had also aired his grievances about not getting featured on TV. That's despite receiving glowing agent reports on the house shows. Dave said he knew his days were numbered after speaking up. Because he was so low down on the card, the higher-ups used his comments as an excuse to cut him. Ron Simmons' career was winding down when he was released in 2004. He'd been talking about retiring for a while, but the decision was essentially made for him by the company. That's because Ron was let go after WWE asked him to go to alcohol rehab. Then after Simmons refused, he was fired.
Basically, they asked him to go into alcohol rehab, and he said no.
In a High Spots Shoot interview, Ron revealed that an incident at the WrestleMania 20 after party was the catalyst for his departure. After returning in 2006, Simmons later entered rehab under WWE's watch in 08.
Some people have reported that you were fired because you had a drinking problem.
Oh, I drank a lot. I might have had some problems when I went up to WrestleMania 20, right? All right. And probably got in some trouble when I was up there with drinking, right? And I had a problem that night. That's for damn sure. They were very supportive with me going out and taking care of my problem and handling them, which I did. Right. You know, and I'm grateful to him for that.
The Sandman is one of the most famous drinking wrestlers both on the show and off it. This would ultimately play into his departure in 2007. By the fall of that year, Sandman was one of the few ECW originals left in WWE. Oddly enough, he was working on the Raw brand after being drafted in the summer. Sandman had already tried to quit, but was told Vince wanted to keep him around. By this point, the 5-time ECW champ was fed up with his place in the company, since he was basically a zero-alcohol version of himself. That was the case on screen, but behind the scenes, Sandman drank himself silly on a tour of South Africa. The Extreme Icon detailed his behavior on the tour in an interview provided by Title Match Wrestling.
What a dream recall. I went out in the blaze of glory. I was like the partiest. I was back to the old Sandman. I sit there. I was the bartender. I had the 2 cases of beer. I had the bottle there. I said, we're going to do this tour ECW style.
On his podcast, Cody Rhodes told a story about seeing Sandman at the hotel bar in South Africa, as the rookie Cody offered to buy the ECW original a drink. However, Cody didn't stick around after realizing how drunk Sandman was.
I asked him what he wants, and I'll never forget. He just, I'll get 4 vodkas. Cool. All right. He slammed one, and where the WWE title is positioned was a big hearth, and he threw it at about 98 miles per hour, and I just walked away.
Once he got back to the States, Sandman was released from his contract and hasn't returned to WWE since.
And I see that Johnny Ace called my friend. I called Johnny Ace. He goes, well, heck, he goes, I got some bad news for you. He said, you're released. I said, you call this bad news? I'm like, I'm relieved. I'm like, you told me yesterday I couldn't have. You told me yesterday to stop asking for my release. Now you call me today to ask for my release, which I think had something to do with the day before they had a meeting that they decided that they're going to offer drug treatment to anybody that used to work for the company, anybody that had never worked for the company, anybody that has worked for the company.
After implementing the wellness policy in 2006, talent would later get fined for smoking weed. However, this wasn't always a rule, since weed wasn't on the test initially. Randy Orton's usage saw him get in trouble earlier in the year, but the policy didn't change until September following a show in Montreal, Canada. That's when Kid Kash was fired for smoking before the event. He'd been out smoking with main eventers, so he was the odd man out in this equation given his low position on the card. Kash explained the situation in an interview with Wrestling Then and Now.
And we're in the parking lot, and Rob Van Dam, Booker T, Batista, Randy Orton, we're all passing it around. So I'm sort of walking back through the parking garage to get to the elevator, and I passed the Brooklyn Brawler. Well, Brooklyn Brawler goes, hey kid, what's going on? He goes, hey, who's got the good shit? That's the good shit. Who's got something? Hook me up, brother. Hook me up. And I was like, I don't have any. I was like, if you go down that way and take you a right, drop my bags and start getting a phone call. John Laurinaitis, he goes, well, here's the deal, kid. He goes, Vince is fucking really pissed. He goes, somebody could have got fucked. I was like, how did you even hear? How did you even know?
Right.
He goes, Brawler.
Kash was told they had to get rid of him to send a message to other wrestlers.
He goes, but Vince wants me to make an example of somebody. He goes, you can't be going into somebody else's country, especially one of our biggest venues and, in the world, blah, blah, blah.
Following this, the wellness policy began to test for pot. Fines would be administered for failures, and if someone was caught multiple times, they would be fired. This was the case with Brian Kendrick in 2009. The bigger stars, meanwhile, paid their fines but wouldn't get released, no matter how many times they got popped. The company relaxed their policy on marijuana in the mid-2010s. The wellness policy came under fire following the Benoit family tragedy in June 2007. Rene Dupree said this was one of the two factors that made him quit WWE shortly after. The other reason was because Vince McMahon cancelled one of his matches right before he was set to go out. Dupree discussed the change on Mic Check with Mr. Anderson.
I get to the Raw in Dallas. As soon as Vince sees me, they call Paul London from Austin to drive in. They're going to put me on Saturday night's main event. So all I did was show up. He saw what I looked like because I was really lean. And Vince was, I could just see him staring at me like, oh. So that's how quick Vince makes all the decisions, right? And he's all about look and perception. So if you look good, you're on TV.
Rene and Paul London were ready to tear it up, but while they were in Gorilla, the show got completely switched around.
And then they canceled the match right there. And then I just felt everything drained. And at that moment, I realized, okay, I'm going to Japan. And like 2 days later, I was booked in Japan, and I stayed there for 16, 17 years.
John Cena versus Great Khali for the WWE title became the opener, whereas the main event saw Eugene, Kane, and Doink the Clown battle Umaga, Kevin Thorne, and Viscera. John Heidenreich was around for a few years in WWE, and the reason he left is quite in keeping with his oddball character. Creative didn't have much for him by the end of 2005, then at the start of 2006, Heidenreich ended up in hospital. Once he was better, agents such as Fit Finlay arrived to collect Heidenreich and bring him to the next show. Finlay recalled this while talking to kayfabe commentaries.
Heidenreich crashed his car in the snow, so he sort of slid off the road, I guess, into the ditch and decided to sleep in the ditch in the car. Well, I guess the highway state patrol came along and told me he couldn't stay there, and they dragged him out and towed him to off the side of the road and stopped at a gas station. And by that time, I guess he got hypothermia or something, and they called an ambulance, and the ambulance took him from that gas station, left his car there, took him to the hospital. Steamboat and I drove up to pick him up, and he wouldn't leave. He said, I can't leave. And the doctors actually wanted him to leave too. He said there's nothing wrong with him. He's fine. He was lying in bed. He's going like, no, I like the food here. What? So he wouldn't come.
So he was just done.
Yeah, I think he was mentally just blew a gasket. And John Heidenreich's mother called me up and asked me why I left John in the hospital on his own. I'm going, what? You're John's mother. I mean, he's like a grown man, and his mother's calling me. What on earth is it? Kindergarten?
The The interaction the agents had with Heidenreich in the hospital ultimately spelled the end of his time with WWE, as he was released from his contract a couple weeks later. He'd been unhappy and was dealing with personal issues, so saw this as a chance to exit the company. Earlier we spoke about top stars keeping their job despite breaking the same rules as the underneath guys. The Junkyard Dog was in the middle of this pack during the late 80s. It said that not being able to reach the main event in WWF, unlike in other territories, contributed to his heavy substance use. Most of the locker room were doing something at this time, but Dog was doing pretty much everything. It went from pot to speed to coke to crack. He'd light up and snort in public while also being late to shows for trying to get his next fix.
I remember JY showing me a jar that he had over 1,000 hits of speed in it.
JYD's addiction issues ended up costing him his job. He wasn't released outright for being on stuff, but rather the knock-on effects which didn't just damage his spot, but the company as well.
Why is he let go from WWF?
No shows, the way I understood it.
Vince didn't care what you did because drugs help you to go. But you miss shows, you scare them when you do that.
How can Vince McMahon put everything on JYD? Because you don't know if he's going to show up or not. You're not dependable, untrustworthy.
Dog forgot one thing. You can't do what the white man do and keep your job.
Now if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out our similar video on 10 hidden WWE secrets fans were never supposed to notice. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time.